Protecting what's important to you. Whether your team is your family, your business, or your employees, you can depend on Cross Insurance to provide the best insurance coverage solutions for what matters most. Cross Insurance has a reputation for building winning partnerships with teams of all sizes. Contact us today, and you can start protecting your team for tomorrow. Your team, your choice. Visit crossagency.com.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion today on helping small businesses thrive in a big business world. Today's event is another installment of the Boston Globe's Outliers of Disruption series sponsored by Cross Insurance. My name is Jessica Pierre, and I currently serve as a Director of Strategic Communications at the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, also known as BECMA. I am also a small business owner. I am the founder of Queen's Company, an organization dedicated to empowering women of color in the greater Boston area. And I'm also the CEO and principal publicist at my PR firm, J. Pierre Communications, where I help social impact brands and political figures get visibility in the media and increase their engagement online. So some quick housekeeping notes for our audience today. Please use the Q&A tool on the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you might have for our panelists. Also, please note that you are all muted and your camera is not on, so we cannot see you. And lastly, this event will be recorded and distributed to everyone that registered for this event. So without further ado, let's jump right into today's program. So we all know the big names in tech. There's Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. In coffee shops, there's Starbucks. The fast food world is dominated by McDonald's, Burger King, and KFC. So how do these businesses build such large empires? And how can small business owners compete with these larger and established businesses in the hopes to have the same success that they have had? Today, we'll be chatting with 3 thought leaders in the Boston community to discuss what it takes for individuals and small business owners to compete against companies like Amazon and Walmart, and how innovation can help provide the resources they need to do so. Please join me in welcoming Catch CEO and co-founder, Kristen Anderson, Form Labs Chief Product Officer, David Lakatos, and the Vice President of Autonomy at Vecna Robotics, Dennis Lassault, to our conversation on the tools and ideas to help to keep small businesses succeeding today. So Kristen, if you wouldn't mind, would you be able to just tell us briefly about yourself and your business and how you define innovation, particularly in the era of COVID-19?
Sure. Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Kristen. As Jessica said, I'm founder and CEO at Catch. We provide benefits for people who don't get benefits from an employer. So our customers are typically individual freelancers, consultants, gigsters, part-time workers, and folks who are at small businesses that may not be providing things like health insurance and retirement. My background is I went to business school about a decade ago, ended up coming to Boston. After that, I finished business school in London and moved here to start consulting. I've worked at a series of startups and nonprofits. I was a professor for a short amount of time and basically worked my way through different types of organizations and institutions before ultimately becoming a founder. And I think that that was a really important journey for me in terms of how I think about our business and how we grow and the people that we serve. We launched in 2018. We are live. We have an iOS and Android app as well as a web app. And basically our product is designed to serve all of the folks who, as I mentioned, aren't getting those really critical things like tax withholding, retirement, health insurance, family leave, time off, all of that stuff, and who have to manage that on their own when they're earning a whole bunch of different types of income from different sources and paid in a very irregular way. So the reason why I'm here today is to talk about how, as individual consultants, freelancers, small business owners, how you can compete, particularly on sort of the back of the house operational side, particularly around HR and benefits, and what it means to be able to outsource appropriately, be compliant, and make sure that you're having a social safety net that's built while you're earning money. So great to be here.
Thank you so much. Denis, we'll go with you next. Please tell us a little bit about your business, who you are, and also how you define innovation, particularly in this era of the COVID-19 pandemic.
All right, so thank you for having me. It's great to be here and to be able to talk about all those important things. So I'm a VP of Autonomy at Vecna Robotics. So Vecna Robotics is providing robotic solutions to customers. That means robots and software to drive those robots around. What we do is moving pallets. So we use a base truck that is usually moving pallets in a warehouse or in a plant, and we put a brain on it, and the brain is driving autonomously the trucks around in the facility. So we have different set of customers, from small business to big business. So it's very interesting to see the difference in between those two and be able to talk about it today. Personally, I'm an engineer by training. I spent 20 years in software and hardware developments. And then I joined the robotic industry 7 years ago for a French company in Paris. And then I moved here in Boston to build the US business of that company. And I went to business school at the same time in MIT, and following that degree, I decided to join Vecna to continue the adventure of robotics. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. All right, David, I have the same question for you as well. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and also how you define innovation in this era of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sure thing. Thank you very much for inviting me. So my name is David. My weird accent is from Hungary. I came about 10 years ago to the US, went to MIT, and actually I started another company out of there. So for me, kind of small businesses are very much on top of mind. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs. After that company, I came to Formlabs. At Formlabs, we pride ourselves kind of bringing industrial quality 3D printing to the desktop, and now we have actually a few other products that are kind of benchtop and larger machines. But the basic idea is take a very powerful technology that used to be very restricted to large companies mostly, and make it available for everyone. We've been very successful at kind of following this doctrine, and now we're one of the largest 3D printing companies by number of units shipped, and really excited to talk about how this empowers businesses, because that's exactly what we do. I feel like we bring this power to not just the large companies. We've had a very interesting, probably that's the best word I can use, year, which we can talk about later, around COVID. We actually became a very integral part of the response early on, with making kind of test swabs that I'm happy to talk about later, but these are all printed in ours, which is cool.
Thank you so much. So Denis, my first question is for you. Can you tell us a little bit about the consolidation curve and how the evolution of technology has helped small businesses thrive, no matter where they fall on the consolidation curve?
Yeah, so the consolidation curve defines how a technology evolves over time, from an idea generated by someone to a new product and then a mature product. So right now with our technology, we are close to be a mature product. And since this type of robot started, to be developed in the 90s, there was a lot of innovation that were put into this industry to get to a point where this product can be used reliably in production critical applications. So with those innovation and progress, the product became affordable to smaller businesses. So in the curve, at the beginning, it's quite expensive, a little bit risky, not really reliable, and then it becomes a real product. And so now we have a lot of small business as customers, because introducing robots in their operations is less risky and more affordable. And so that's pretty much what we can say about the consolidation curve and how being, a nearly mature product now is good for small businesses.
Thank you so much. So David, speaking of products, how can 3D printing democratize product development for smaller businesses?
So when we started, when the company started back in 2012, the options to buy a 3D printer were either you bought a pretty crappy printer on the lower end that I can basically equate to a glue gun on a gantry. It's pretty rough kind of surface quality, not a lot of material options. And if you're a professional trying to use these machines for rapid prototyping, trying to save money and time to go to market, they were not very adequate because they weren't able to really create kind of consistent results over prototyping cycles. Or your other options was buy $100,000, $200,000 3D printer that really was able to perform at the quality that you needed. So what we did is kind of merge those two worlds. What if you were able to buy a machine for a couple $1,000s? Certainly not, this is not a personal printer. It's not meant, if you're interested in 3D printing, this is not the printer to buy. But if you're a professional, a couple $1,000s is not something that you're very worried about, even if you're a small company. And then take the quality from these industrial printers, the repeatability, and merge those two. So the basis of what we do is invent technology that kind of creates that access, both from a price point perspective and from an ease of use perspective. So it doesn't require a crazy amount of knowledge or training in order to get into and use these powerful technologies. And the result is that you're able to use the same technology that Apple uses to prototype, which means that if you're designing a hardware product, if you're designing an accessory, if you want to do user studies with your product, you don't need to wait and do guesswork, but you're able to iterate through those prototypes yourself. And not just that, but one other thing that we have seen very early on from the beginnings of our Kickstarter project, which raised $3 million, and after that, we kind of had a kind of following in the Kickstarter community and in the small business community, because not only were people using and businesses using our printers to prototype, but they also were using it for the first 500 or 1,000 kind of production units. So if you were making, let's say you were making a small consumer electronics, you were making a set-top box, going next to a TV, you were making a toy, instead of going into very expensive tooling and injection molding that takes a lot of time, a lot of like commitment from a capital perspective, instead of that, you could just use a 3D printer and literally print out all of your products, all of your enclosures, small plastic parts that you needed in order, and you were able to iterate faster, you were able to be a lot more nimble, you were able to make as many as you wanted without putting down all the capital. So that kind of scale invariance that you can make really 2 of something, 50 of something, 500 of something is really lends itself extremely well to small businesses.
Thank you so much. So switching gears a little bit, Kristen, I have a question for you, since we're living in an era where the gig economy is booming. And I really love that your especially as a small business owner myself, I really love that your company takes a huge burden off of freelancers and contractors and self-employed individuals who don't always have access to a payroll department to help them navigate paying their taxes and finding benefits. So as the workforce continues to change and evolve and the gig economy continues to grow, how important is it for small businesses and small business owners to create systems of efficiency when it comes to these types of operations in order to scale?
Yeah, I mean, you say it's switching gears, but I actually see a lot of really interesting parallels between robotics and 3D printing and some of the stuff we're talking about. I think that the main key is to allow small business owners to do what they do best, and managing robots may not be it. And, printing and owning a lot of like heavy infrastructure to build hardware may not be it. And it's the same thing that we see really on the truly micro scale of business, which is the individual, right? So someone who may be pulling together different types of income, doing some contract work, doing some gig work, and trying to figure out how to free up their time. I think a lot of the things that we're talking about across all 3 businesses is about creating leverage. And the biggest thing you can do is leverage your time. and finding your unique opportunity to add value as an individual or as a small business is the thing that you can do to be the most successful in this economy as a whole. And so I think that, like for Catch, for example, our goal is to free you up from the stuff that you just don't want to spend any time on. And it's always funny to talk about taxes because we spend all day talking about how you can do taxes and automate taxes and do tax withholding for individuals who have multiple income streams. But really, we are able to exist because no one cares about taxes. So it's kind of a fun place to be. Like, nobody wants to think about their taxes. Nobody wants to think about their retirement. They want to be thinking about what they're making, right? Like, our customers might be someone who's, using the 3D printer to build something, to build a prototype, to experiment, to try and sell to customers. And the last thing they want to be doing is the stuff that we're taking care of with health insurance. So I think the future economy, beyond just saying it's like a changing workforce where people can, work on demand, it is also about the creator economy and the ability to free you up to build the sorts of things that you want to build. And I think that's really the trend that we're looking to jump onto and really allow for this operationalization of the back office tasks. I think, again, no one cares about taxes, but here I go talking about them again. If you look at payroll, for a long time, like my mom used to run payroll for her office. She was an office manager, and payroll was like an ordeal, right? It was something for a small business of a couple dozen people that, like, it was an ordeal every single pay period, and it took time, and there were multiple steps. And now there are softwares like Gusto and like Rippling that basically automate the entire process, and people just get paid, and we sort of take that for granted. So in terms of the maturation, I think we're kind of on that curve as well, where we're seeing now we can break that down to individual consumers and say there's a way for you to automate this process so that you don't have to be involved, and all of these things are just taken care of anytime you get paid.
Thank you so much. From what I hear from a lot of small business owners who are transitioning from working their full-time job and running their small business, and hopefully, being able to work on their business full-time, is that they're concerned about benefits. So I think it's awesome that you guys not only do payroll, but also sort that out so that people don't have to go through that in the dark, because it can get very confusing. So thank you for sharing. David, I have another question for you. So I know that for larger companies, it usually takes a while to come up with a prototype and test it and retest it and really make sure that it's the best product that it can possibly be. So how does 3D printing enable the people-centered research and community input needed to make user-focused products a success?
Sure. So I think that this one is kind of what the genesis of 3D printing is coming from. So 3D printing has been around actually for a long time. It's been around since 1984 or so, and pretty much from the very beginning, the idea was you have all these amazing engineers who can think about different ways to move around matter to create products, but often it takes until the very last moment, literally after the manufacturing is done and a lot of money is committed to, before a user can actually interact with that. So there were different movements in kind of industrial design and how kind of prototyping became kind of the de facto how everybody designs products. But it's this basically the iterative kind of you put a design together, you either print it out or rapid prototype it with other technologies, and then you either hold it in your hand and test it out in whatever that is. If you're trying to make a garden hose holder, testing it out yourself is one way to do it. That's already great because if is this comfortable? Are the ergonomics working the right way? But then very often there are other stakeholders. There are potentially a user panel that you want to give these parts to. There are potentially more buy-in needed from the company itself. So you need to kind of internally use that prototype to really drive a point home that this is a product far enough along that now it's time to invest in it. So it really energizes and democratizes that process that used to be very much kind of limited to just engineers working back in the day on paper, then today in computer-aided design, and then really democratizes it by really giving access to these prototypes and the kind of in-between prototyping stages to a wider audience. And I think that really, at the end of the day, what engineers really care about is two things, and what companies care about is two things. being on time and being on budget. That's honestly what they care about. And at the end of the day, if they're not able to test out their ideas in between, then they will most often have to backtrack. They will find out things too late in the process, and then they need to take 2 steps back, spend more time, more energy, and it leads to often product cancellations or other problems. And while a large company might be able to survive that, small companies can't. Like if you're just starting out a company, if we were to make a product as our first product, the Form 1, if we would have made the wrong product for the Form 1, we would not be in existence today. So it's really important that you're able to de-risk the product development process as you go through it.
Thank you so much. Dernier, can you talk to me a little bit about how robots are actually helping businesses and entrepreneurs, but also their employees as well? Because there's a lot of criticism around robots and being used in companies and maybe replacing human jobs. So can you tell us a little bit about how it's actually helpful for those in the workforce right now?
Yeah, so I mean, thinking of robots as things that will replace human jobs is a classical thought, but actually this is not accurate on what is happening at customers. So especially the small businesses. You as a small business, you want to optimize your operations because everything is critical, basically. And so to do that, you have to focus the human on a very high added value task. So this is pretty much what the robots will do. They will focus people on what people do best, and robots will do what robots do best. So as an example, we have a customer. They do it's a small warehouse, and they distribute spare parts for machines. And so one of their employees was doing half of his day solving issues, being sure the orders is on time, is the right thing at the right time for the customer, and half of his day moving pallets around in the warehouse. So basically, the added value was only half a day. And for him, it was very boring to just drive this truck around half of the day instead of solving problem and talking to people, interacting with the things. So so the robots does this now in this warehouse. So we move pallets around in lieu of this guy, and this guy has a better job. He does things that are more interesting. So it's just an example to explain that giving responsibility to people, empowering them into doing interesting things is good for the company, and you will get more value from that than keeping people doing jobs that are not interested. So that's pretty much what robots can bring to business in general, but especially to small businesses.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for all of you, and it's actually one of the audience questions, but it was one of my questions as well. So can you guys tell us a little bit about the types of businesses that actually use your products and services? And Kristen, if you'd like to go first, can you tell us a little bit about how your services are different or maybe even better than employee sponsored benefits?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned, we serve individuals. So our customers are people at the end of the day, but there are people who often run businesses or work at small businesses. So large groups that work with us, hairstylists, fitness instructors, photographers, writers, journalists, entrepreneurs, marketing consultants, communications consultants. I think that is sort of the broad range that we serve, a bit of classic gig work as well. But what we tend to find is folks who come through from the marketplaces like Uber or Lyft or DoorDash, oftentimes they have other work as well. They're sort of getting their business off the ground. They're using those platforms as a way to sort of supplement that. In terms of how we compare to more traditional payroll and benefits, the short answer is our benefit system in this country was built for companies, right? It was actually built for large companies. It was built for these massive factories that had 10,000 employees, and they offered a pension, and they offered. So I think in a lot of ways, the system isn't exactly built for what we're trying to do. And that's one of the things that we're trying to change, because people are opting for independent work, whether the system is built for that or not. So I think some of the challenges to overcome are really around providing high quality health insurance, which is, again, going to be a forever battle until something big changes outside of these four walls. But it's being able to provide high quality health insurance and making sure that people are getting the tax credits that they need for the other products that we have available, retirement, those sorts of things. That's the biggest distinction, is that as an individual, you don't necessarily have access to those products. The upside is we're a lot less expensive than what a lot of the business companies charge. Because we're serving as an individual consumer, you don't pay nearly as much money. So there's kind of a trade-off, and I think anyone who's gone into independent work sort of knows that there are huge upsides of freedom and flexibility, but certainly challenges that we're still kind of trying to fill the gaps for right now.
Thank you so much. David, same question. Can you tell us about some of the businesses or industries that are using Formlabs right now, and how you're able to make your services accessible to them?
Sure. So most of our customers are still small and medium-sized businesses, but over the last 7 years, we really expanded. We have about 70,000 printers in the field, so we have a fairly large fleet. It's really interesting. We started off with very small businesses, again, rapid prototyping. We saw a lot of uptake after that in kind of the manufacturing industry, helping kind of get manufacturing engineers get through kind of the last steps of setting up a manufacturing line with jigs and fixtures and stuff like that. Then something interesting happened. We started expanding our materials portfolio. Today we have not just kind of general purpose materials, but also biocompatible materials. And we started seeing an uptake in the dental market. So today we're actually the largest kind of dental 3D printing company as well, which is interesting because I know that most people don't think about dentists as small businesses, but they totally are. They're actually, I always think about them as basically just very savvy business owners who happen to be dentists, and they really are thinking about themselves as a business. They think about marketing probably more than the average business. It's a very interesting part of the economy. And we found a lot of uptake there because normally dentists used to go to what's called dental labs, which is kind of centralized large kind of factories regionally. When you need to, for example, let's say that you need an implant or if you need a denture, they would send out those kind of scan files and everything that needed to construct those dentures into a central laboratory. Now they're able to do it in-house. They can save time and they can save money for the patient. So that kind of 3D printing being used kind of for the end product production is super interesting, especially in dentistry. But we see the same thing in kind of a long tail of industries from, we see architects, small architecture firms using 3D printing to make models. We see medical device companies using it. One of my favorite kind of user stories is we have actually had a surgeon use our printer for creating splints basically for children because, as the child goes through very, very rapid growth in the beginning of their life, when you make a splint, which usually is expensive and used with kind of heat forming plastics, stuff like that, they grow out of it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So it's very cost prohibitive, and it's just can't help you enough. So this particular dad who's was making it for his child was able to kind of iterate through that process alone without having to involve tons of people and kind of do it on their own. Our printers are also used in kind of the entertainment industry a lot. So actually most Hollywood effects, you would think about them as these gigantic, Warner Brothers and whatever, but actually a lot of the effects companies are small, and they kind of produce all of the when you think about I don't know if you like horror movies, but the Stranger Things monster, for example, and stuff like that. These are all prototyped on our machine, and then they're used actually a lot of times as printed and then painted parts that they photograph and video for parts. So these are, I know that this is kind of a random potpourri of all of the different use cases, but 3D printing is kind of like that basically small businesses come in all shapes and forms. And a lot of them unexpectedly end up using our printers because it just really gives them access to a very powerful technology.
Thank you so much. So Denis, I have a similar question as well too. What are the types of businesses that you guys are working with, and in particular small businesses?
Yeah, so we have two types of customers. The very big ones, so who want to deploy massively the robots. So, you can think about, DHL, FedEx, Procter & Gamble, this type of customers. What they try to solve is the shortage of manpower, the cost of turnover and training, the safety also on site. So they use the robots for that in a massive way. And the other part of our customers are small businesses. And as I was alluding to before, this is not massive deployment. Robots is, in that case, a new employee. It's 1, 2, maybe 3 robots because they have smaller operations, but they want those operations to be reliable and safe. And as I said before, to focus their employees on added value tasks that are solving a problem for their customers and not just running around with pallets on a truck. So yeah, this is what we have as customers. I mean, in terms of typical small customer, it will be industrial companies, either manufacturing or moving parts and delivering parts to customers. Pretty much that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go towards questions that were pre-submitted to people who registered for this event. And the first question that I want to ask is, someone said, mentorship is a key component in success, no matter the scale. It can be hard for entrepreneurs to gain access when being innovative or creating a new avenue. What is the best way to gain access to big companies to create a space for mentorship? And any one of you can feel free to jump in and answer that question.
I think we're probably the smallest company on the panel, so I can talk about my own journey a little bit. The first thing I would say is you don't necessarily want your mentors to be from big companies. Their experience is totally different, and so while they may know certain things, I think a lot of the challenges that you face as an entrepreneur are often better solved by other people who have been entrepreneurs. And who have been at early stage businesses and who have grown, from early stage to larger stage. Just finding, for example, like we do financial products and services. I don't really look for anyone at Fidelity to be my mentor. Obviously, they know a lot and they have a very successful business, but my journey is much more closely mapped with Jessica, who's out there on her own trying to find customers and out there, even though our businesses are very different. So I guess what I would say in terms of how that wraps into advice is to think a little bit orthogonally about who has similar experiences to you, and look for those opportunities to network with those people, even if the business isn't exactly the same. I think you'll often find that your best mentors are going to come from a group of people who live the challenges that you live every day.
Yeah, I will totally concur on that. You need to find people that have been through the same struggle you're going through. So as a small business or entrepreneur, it's other entrepreneurs. And a way to make it happen, to have access to those people, is just to connect. So you connect to someone, will connect to someone else, and a door open, another door open, another door. So there is no magic recipe. You have to be ready to sometime entertain some connections, and sometime lose time. You meet someone and there is nothing happening. It's you cannot help each other, and that happens, and that's fine. But maybe this person can connect you to another person who can help you. So it's this kind of research work and connection to people that is a little bit difficult, but you will also find out how how those people can make you think about things differently. And yeah, there's always something to get from connecting with someone. So yeah, and I will also, yeah, it's a personal experience. I would avoid the big things where you can connect with a lot of people. I think it's more like individual, one-on-one connections that are good. If someone can introduce you to someone, then you start from there, step by step, building your network instead of going into a lot of big things where you're supposed to meet everyone and actually you're not meeting the right people over there. So that would be my advice.
Thank you. I definitely agree. And I feel like now during the pandemic, since we can't go to large networking events anymore, now's a perfect time for, upcoming business owners, entrepreneurs to really try to cultivate different relationships in their lives and their business network as well too. So using LinkedIn and other online platforms to connect with individuals is really important and key. David, was there anything you wanted to add to the question around mentorship for small businesses looking to connect with larger businesses?
No, I think my panelist friends have summarized it well. I would say maybe one other thing I would say is that I actually experience it from the other direction, where it's like, actually it's sometimes too easy to get advice and too many people volunteer to be mentors. And I think it's really important to filter and pick one or maybe two people that you go to when you are worried about something. We are living in an extremely connected world. There is, depending on what you mean by mentorship, I think everybody can have some level of access to it. So definitely make sure that you do some filtering, because I think there are definitely more mentors available than successful businesses, and that should tell you something.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are willing to give advice. Doesn't cost a lot to give it, and one of the hardest things you have to do is know which advice to follow and which advice not, especially when you're starting your own business and you're getting up and running. And sometimes it is best to just not have that, and it's best to sort of trust yourself. You're doing this for a reason, and so I'd say mentorship is definitely important, but so is knowing yourself and your own abilities.
Thank you. So we've also received a ton of different questions around funding. And I think a lot of people might be in a phase where they're looking to get more funding, whether it's to supplement their current income for their business, or maybe they were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I wanted to ask you all, like, what advice you have for small businesses that are looking to position themselves to attract venture capitalists or receive investors so that they can scale their businesses?
Oh, good.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of people ask me if, like, the pandemic happened, like, is nobody investing anymore? Is the world has come to an end? And I would say that, I wouldn't say the opposite is true, but like, this is definitely not true. I would say that there is a lot of activity. Interest rates are low. Investors are still looking for places to put their money. So I would say that this is just as good time to get started and raise money than any other, and maybe even better. There's a long list of companies that have started during downturns and difficult periods, like the last 2000. I forgot the full list, but like Airbnb, Dropbox, like there's a bunch of companies that started right around then and succeeded because they were built during a time when you needed to be a little bit more conservative and watch your bottom line a little bit more and overall make the right investments. So I would say just like encouraging that, like, this is a great time. If you have an idea, this is a great time to get started, and don't be worried about it. You can't meet a lot of times with investors that I've heard as well, so that's definitely weird. I've just talked to a friend of mine who has successfully raised a round from a venture capitalist completely online, which that's definitely not normal, and I'm sure everybody's getting used to it, but it's still happening. So those people have not like left Earth and retired or something like that. They're still alive.
So as someone who's been fundraising almost constantly in the last 18 months, we've raised about $8 million total. Almost all of our investors are in Silicon Valley, including Khosla Ventures, which actually do some really interesting hardware investment. But I think, Jessica, you said a really important note in how you introduced this that I think is like really important that a lot of people miss. Investment is typically to scale your business. And I think that's really hard for people. I think they want money to go build their business, and that's not typically how venture money works. Unfortunately, like the ideal world would be to say, I have an idea and I'd like to go build it. But the traditional use of venture capital, private equity, like capital in general, is to scale a business. And so I'd say my advice at the very early days is build as much of your business as you can without venture backing, and get proof points, right? Use companies that can do 3D printing for you without a ton of money. Like, do as much as you can to de-risk your business, because ultimately venture capitalists are looking to invest in something that they believe is going to succeed. And I think sometimes there's a perception that venture capitalists are big risk takers. They're not. They're actually just very good at assessing risk. And so I think that that's a very important distinction. And so when you think about raising funds from a venture capitalist, it's what can you do to de-risk your business? Why do you know it's going to work? So a good example is to say, okay, we serve, you know, if you were building a business like Formlabs, for example, you could say, okay, we have one machine and we've found like this number of customers, and we've found that we're able to earn this amount of business, and we're watching our bottom line in these ways. And then we want to raise this money so that we can buy 70,000 machines, right? And I think that's kind of the process that investors look for, which I think is very different than a lot of the like sort of Hollywood stereotypes of Silicon Valley and raising money. It's the like, I have a slide deck and that's the thing that's going to raise me money. It is much more about demonstrating your ability to drive returns and to actually grow a business in a meaningful way. And so I think just like having that in your mind, like the more you can do to actually grow your business, the more successful you'll be at raising money. Because there are certainly folks out there who are funding right now. But I think that, again, there is a little bit more of an eye towards what the unit economics are and how the fund is going to be returned and like what that looks like. So just focus on your business and your customers, and the funding usually comes secondary from doing that.
Thank you so much. Yep, that's very, very important to get a business model down that works and that you just need the funding to replicate it and increase your revenue, not necessarily to create, to bring your idea to life or create your dream. Durni, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that particular question about how small businesses can position themselves to attract more capital?
I think, you know, if you have a good business model, as you said, and if your product makes sense, if you solve a problem that someone has, it's going to work. Sometimes you need a little bit help of capital. So maybe it's not venture capitalists, but angels, or because, you know, if you're in something that is, you know, I'm thinking about medical devices or anything that requires quite a lot of investment upfront, you're not always able to do it by yourself. And so then you can go with angels. So that's different than VCs. So it's usually less money, but at least it helps you kind of bootstrap what you're doing a little bit more, and be able then to demonstrate something, and then to what Kristen was saying, like getting to a point where you need to scale, and then you go to the VCs. So that's, you know, there is, for the people on the panel, there is a lot of literature about, you know, the different, you know, angel, seed, Series A, Series B, Series C. So those have names and are defined because it's meaningful. So there's a beginning and then bigger series of investments. And so I would start by, if I would create a business now, I would start by getting educated about that and understanding how it works. And not forget that it's important to, money is just a mean to get somewhere. You need to get the vision if the vision is right and you're solving a real problem, then you're going to make it. It's not maybe the investor you're going to talk to today, maybe it's tomorrow, and maybe it's your own money. Maybe you have to ask your parents or your family, friends, but you know, you're going to get there if you have the right vision and the right product.
Thank you so much. I want to remind all of the attendees that you can submit any question using the Q&A button below. We have about 15 minutes left with our panelists, so please feel free to do that, and I'm happy to ask your questions for this particular event. And we have one question right here. It says, crowdsourcing fundraising for your business can happen through Mainvest out of Salem, Massachusetts. It's like a group of angel investors. So that's a resource that somebody shared. So it's called Mainvest out of Salem, Massachusetts. It's like a group of angel investors. So for those of you that were interested in funding opportunities for your business, definitely check out Mainvest. Kristen, I have a question for you, and I think it's very unique to the work that you do, but not necessarily unique to the business space, is that one main component of your mission is lobbying. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about how lobbying plays a role in the overall work of your business.
Yeah, I think we're very different from most early stage tech companies to be as early as we are and focused on how we're making a difference in the regulatory space. But I think that's somewhat by nature of dealing with financial services and insurance. And so I think the way that we often like to think about it is that we're representing people who don't have lobbyists. They're individual workers. There are small business associations, but again, we tend to represent people as individuals, right? So the people who are earning multiple sources of income. And there's not really a group there. And so we don't really talk about it as lobbying, we talk about it as advocacy. So again, welcome to my background in a nonprofit, but if you think about like the advocacy side of it, how are you thinking about what the impact is going to be on your customers? So for example, just like one really clear example is that a company that offers a 401k, you can contribute up to $19,000 per year into that account. That's great. That's a huge resource that allows you to prepare yourself for retirement. For an independent worker, there is something called a SEP IRA, but it's not particularly simple or easy to get access to. The traditional individual retirement account, it's called an IRA, the annual limit is $7,000. Why is there that disparity, right? Like we should be allowing for products that keep people as protected no matter how they choose to work. And so I think for us, it's about crafting a narrative that like helps put our users' interests first. Health insurance is another one of those where you start to blend the lines a little bit of like, what is your company's mission versus like, what is the political opinion? And so I think particularly on health insurance, there's just a big question of like, how do we get better options into individuals' hands, right? Like the individual options that are available are very expensive. They're very confusing. There's a lot of challenges in that industry that I won't go into now because that's not the purpose of this panel, but I think that that's part of our narrative is to say like, we are helping you, not just by using our product, but by being able to represent the things that you need to a group of people that you otherwise don't. Again, you don't have the time for it. Like if you're running a small business, you don't have the time to do that. So that's one of the things that we take on.
I love that. Thank you so much. At BECMA, we not only provide technical assistance and support to Black-owned businesses, but we also do a number of different advocacy as well too, because that part is really important to have like a greater impact because, you know, your business works to solve a really, really, really important problem, but you can also do it on a larger scale as well too. So thank you for sharing. David, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier that your company is doing some work to address the COVID-19 crisis. Can you expand a little bit and tell us more about how Formlabs is being involved in the work being done to slow down the pandemic?
Sure. So back in March, basically when things started to unfold, it was pretty clear that a lot of our customers who are, you know, basically we have one of our kind of verticals is the kind of medical industry and hospitals, clinicians and dentists. They were all kind of on the front line thinking about how, you know, they can protect themselves and their patients, but also how they can generally help, you know, the world. And so we basically saw an explosion of interest in thinking about new devices, replicating devices that have shortages from, and figuring out ways that 3D printing can assist creating those. So some of the projects that, I think became like, we literally had a list of 50 plus. So I will focus on the ones that I think really made a difference. One of them was the swabs and MP swabs in general. So for those who are not familiar with, hopefully most people are not familiar with it, because that means that you've had to have one of these tests. But if you need to take a test, they take a big stick like this and they shove it down your nose. It's very, very uncomfortable. And then they turn it a little bit, but it's important because that's pretty much the only way currently that doctors are able to, not to 100%, but to a very large degree, determine if you have an active kind of virus replicating inside of your body. So normally, on a normal month, a year ago, there were maybe 1 million of these made a month worldwide. There are 2 companies basically that make it, and it's kind of not, it's not a very interesting industry. Most people, including me, never heard of nasopharyngeal swabs, but it became a hit, obviously, and we now need, I mean, depending on how much testing you want to do, but like hundreds of millions of these. So the problem with injection molding in general and the way that these are made, and it's injection molding and other technologies, is that you need to kind of have a plan ahead of time. You need to cut these tools, which are basically big blocks of steel that you need to machine out and then use as kind of a mold to inject plastic into. So when you want to ramp up a factory from 1 million to 10 million a month or whatever, you need to kind of have that plan, months ahead of time, but at least tens of weeks ahead. So injection molding is the way that ultimately this is going to be solved. But like in March, April, May, June, there was basically no technology that was, other than 3D printing, that was able to kind of fill the gap. So very quickly we worked together with hospitals, specifically University of USF, University of South Florida, and North Valley Health, which is one of the largest New York hospital systems. And we developed a design that works well for 3D printing, and we started printing these out. And then we have a resin factory, chemical plant in Ohio that we turned into basically a swab factory. And we started making lots of swabs. And then we have lots of hospital printers that hospitals were able to print swabs for themselves. And we had dental labs joining in as well. And the net result is that I believe we're up to about 8 million swabs total printed over the last like four months or so, which is that a lot for the world? Not, but like I think it does mean that like we were able to help like 8 million tests kind of go through worldwide, which is really exciting. We also worked on the kind of ventilator shortages when there was a problem. That's a kind of we worked together with North Valley Health on that as well. And that's an interesting way to like split up, basically, instead of like one ventilator go to one patient, which kind of makes sense, like a way to kind of convert other ventilators that are not ventilators specifically, but BiPAP. Those are more readily available, cheaper alternatives to ventilators into ventilators. With a 3D printed part, and also ventilator splitters that basically turn one ventilator the ability to hook it up to multiple people, which definitely is not the most elegant way of doing it, but it also kind of works. And I mean, back in March, we were kind of back to the whatever works is good enough. So yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all that your company is doing right now to help us deal with this moment. So we have one last question from someone in the audience, and the question is, what's one thing you would do differently if you were going to start your company again? One thing you learned from a big mistake and would change next time?
So I think there is no magic recipe. So I was not in the funding team of Vecna. I worked on other companies like this, being a funder. So it's creating a company is a mess. It's a messy process, and every day you wake up and you're like, are we doing the right things? And and this is how it works. So there is no like, oh, there is no aha moment like, oh, I forgot that and I would have been more successful. I think it's about being very disciplined about some things. There is a very good book about discipline entrepreneurship written by a guy named Bill Aulet, A-U-L-E-T, who is the director of the MIT Entrepreneurship Center. And it's a very good book. It's not a recipe. It's like how to manage the messiness of having a company. And there you can find a lot of good nuggets on what to do and not do to be successful.
I think there's a phrase that I've kind of learned. First of all, I guess it came from a friend who said, when you start leading a company, you will turn into a caricature of yourself. And like one of the things is that you often say the same thing. You say it to your team, you say it to whatever. And my caricature is ruthless prioritization. So the ability to just like set aside the things that don't matter. In terms of big mistake, and again, you don't always get it right? Like you're not always going to get it right. You will make mistakes and you have to forgive yourself for those and move on. I think one thing that it really depends on what your business is, but as a software company, one of the things that I'd say if I was going to do it again, and this is a very common trope, but second-time founders focus on distribution. First-time founders focus on product. I think as a first-time founder, I focused a ton on product, and it was like we have to build the best thing possible. That was my background. And I think that you start to realize how important it is to be able to find your customers, acquire your customers, like who are you partnering with? Like, I think all of that sort of stuff is often not the thing that drives people to entrepreneurship. A lot of times you become an entrepreneur because you want to build something and make something. But I think, again, second-time founders often will lean much more heavily on the like, okay, how, like if you're doing B2B, how are you building sales? How are you like building relationships for sales? How are you like that sort of stuff becomes so critical as your business grows. And I think I wish I had spent more time thinking about that in the very, very, very early days, because I'm now playing catch up, trying to make sure I know all the stuff I need to
know. I very often think about the mistakes that we've made, and I wasn't think that we don't have enough time, because it's probably, even if we go year by year, there's enough. I would say that maybe two things to share. One of them is I have almost never regretted going too fast doing something, and I very often regret going too slow. So that's maybe a helpful thing. The second one is that I think it's actually totally okay to, like, there are, I don't remember who said this, but there are like two different, like type 1 and type 2 kind of mistakes. Type 1 is the one that you can recover, and type 2 is the one that you can't. And it's just important to recognize, like, when you are making a decision, whether it's a type 1 or a type 2. Like type 2 can like kill a company, like, you know, actually taking money from the wrong person, or like, you know, like not raising not fundraising before you would be getting into the red zone. That's a type 2 decision. Like if you mess that one up, you won't be able to recover. You know, building the wrong product too early, that might be a type 2, but later on it might only be a type 1 problem. And so I think just knowing what type of mistake you're going to make potentially is kind of the most important thing. And after that, like, you probably can't make an infinite number of type 1 errors, but like you can make a lot, and everybody does, so it's okay.
Thank you so much. This was a very inspirational conversation, and I learned a lot, and I hope all of the attendees today got some great nuggets that they'll be able to use and enforce in their own small businesses. And I thank you all for your time. I thank the Boston Globe and Cross Insurance for hosting us all today, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.